So today I'm going to be making what's called a sourdough starter. And for all the bakers out there, you're going to know exactly what I'm talking about. But for those of you who are not bakers, pretty much like myself, a sourdough starter is it's sort of a living culture that you create with just two ingredients: water and flour, and that's all it is. Okay, but you need to feed this thing. It's like a living creature almost, which is why traditionally people name these, and we will be naming it later on. But the downside is it's going to take 7 days to make it. But in 7 days sounds like a long time, but it's dead simple because you can basically forget about it. You just need to feed this once every 24 hours or so. So to start off this sourdough starter, first thing you're going to need to do is you're going to need your flour. Now I'm just going to use plain flour. You can use whole grain flour or bread flour, but try and stick to the same type all the way through, otherwise it takes it a little while to adjust to the new flour. And you can also want one of these jars, okay? Quite a large jar, because we're kind of hoping that this small amount we're going to start with is going to double and double again in size as it starts to ferment. So we're going to measure out. We're going to do 120 grams of flour to 120 grams of warm water. So first of all, measure out your 120 grams of flour. Then you're going to want to get this 120 grams of flour into our jar. And then with our flour in the jar, what we're going to do then is measure out around about 120 grams, which equates to about 120 millilitres of water. And then we're going to just pop this into the microwave for 15-30 seconds just to make it lukewarm. Lukewarm, pop it straight into the flour. So as you can see, we've stirred this in quite well now, and I've used the handle end of a fork so I can get into all of the corners, and you should wind up with a kind of gloopy porridge sort of mixture. It smells pretty bland at the moment. Make sure that that's all well combined. And that's your lot. That's all you need to do for day one. So we're going to leave that now, and we're going to put the lid on. Okay, when we put the lid on, we're not going to secure it. We're just going to pop it on loosely. Okay, so it just gives it an opportunity to breathe a little bit as well. And we are going to leave that on the side of the cooker for about 24 hours. See you tomorrow. So it's day 2 of our sourdough starter video. I'm not going to lie to you, I'm not as happy as I thought I was going to be with its progress over the last 24 hours. But you know, that could be expected because of the room temperature and the time of year, the sort of flour that I've used. It has started to become active, but last night it was a little bit cold, and I came down in the middle of the night with a genius idea, and I covered it in a tea towel. So as you can see, when we take the lid off and look inside, you can see that the sourdough starter has actually started to become very slightly active. The there are a few little bubbles in there, and there's a very slight hint of that hooch liquid starting to develop just on the top. So for today, we're not actually going to need to feed this at all. What we're going to do is we're going to pop the lid back on it. I'm going to wrap it back up in this tea towel. We're going to give it another 24 hours before we start to feed it. Hopefully it'll become more active overnight. In fact, what I might do later on this evening is I'm going to pop it in a slightly warmer place in the house. See you tomorrow. So we're into day 3 of our sourdough starter. I've just had a little look at this this bad boy, and the news is good. It's alive. So we take the tea towel off, and I'll show you exactly what's happened to this starter. And then today we are going to feed it. So I'll go through the feeding process, which you're going to continue then for the next 4 days or so. Okay, let's take a look. There he is. Now, as you can see from here, we have got a very definite line through the middle, funnily enough, but that's because it's fermented over the top of a hooch layer, and there is a definite smell. This stuff stinks. Oh. And you can clearly see around halfway through that hooch has definitely developed. Okay, and also, as you can see by looking at it, it's doubled in size as well because it's all fermented inside, and it looks absolutely amazing. This is exactly how we wanted it to go. So what we're going to do today is we are going to give this a feeding, and to start off we're going to need to discard half of this. So we're looking probably about 5 or 6 tablespoons of this mixture. Get rid of it. So we're just going to beat that down a little bit, and you can see the texture of it has gone very marshmallowy. And then we're just going to spoon out about 120 millilitres of this into a container. Oh, that really does stink bad. Okay, so pretty much what we've got to do now is we've got 120 grams of flour, and the same flour we used before, and 120 millilitres of lukewarm water. And all we're going to do is we are going to put the flour into the starter as before. And just remember, when you're doing this, use the same grade of flour that you started off with, okay? Because otherwise your sourdough starter is going to have to adjust to a different type of flour, and it's just going to slow the whole process down. And once the flour's in there, we just add our lukewarm water, mix it all together. Get the lid back on it as well quick, because this smell is killing me. And there we go. With that all mixed back in, okay, as you can see, it's doubled in size pretty much. Get the lid back on the stinky little monkey and leave it for another 24 hours. Oh, stinks. So day 4 of our sourdough starter, and things are looking pretty good. Still pretty smelly, but looking pretty good. it's going to have another feed in today, so pretty much the same as yesterday, but what I'm going to show you today is we're going to get rid of the hooch. Okay, remember I showed you that hooch layer? Well, as you can see over here, that layer has reformed, and what we're going to do is we're going to get rid of it with a spoon. So we'll show you how to do that. We do a quick feed in, wrap it up, start again tomorrow. You know, and you do want to be careful when you're taking out this this hooch layer, because you don't want it really to mix in too much into the starter. Otherwise, you're just going to be, you just lost it. So what we're going to do, I think I've got pretty much all of it out now. We will remove half of the starter, and then we will feed it. Get rid of this hooch, it stinks. So once again, all we're going to do is pretty much just get rid of half of this starter, so probably about I don't know, 100 mils maybe. Get a shot of that. There we are, that should do, and we'll just feed it as we did yesterday. Sometimes people, this stuff that we were going to throw away here, sometimes people could keep this, and what you could do is to start off another batch if you want to make this stuff in bulk. But if, like most people, you're just going to want one batch of it, throw it away. And there we go, 120 grams of flour, 120 millilitres of water. Feeding time for the starter. And as you can see, this stuff is really starting to get quite thick and sticky. Don't think it smells as bad as it did yesterday. Okay, so let's get this wrapped back up into his tea towel and put away for tomorrow. So here we are on day 5 of our sourdough starter recipe, and to be honest with you, not an awful lot to report. It's the same old, and you're going to find this. I'm just going to mention a few little things. Let's take a little look at what we've got down here, because it's been resting now for 24 hours. Let's just have a little look to see what we've got, and then I'll just explain a few minor details to you. So as you can see, our sourdough starter firstly is just over half filled the jar already, so this is good, means it's active, and it's fermenting like crazy at the moment, which is great because it means it doesn't need feeding. And as you will have noticed, there's no hooch level there on this occasion, whereas yesterday, if you look at it from yesterday, we had a definite line of hooch. And just to mention to you that the hooch, when you get that hooch level, that means that it's ready for feeding. Okay, so once you see that developing, it's time to feed it, and that's whether it's been 8 hours, 12 hours or 24 hours. So keep feeding it, alright? And you can always throw an extra bit of flour in there if you like, if it's not fermenting enough, because it's the flour that it feeds on. Okay, that's what the culture feeds on. So if there's no hooch, it's still fermenting, there's no need to feed it. And the other thing is it's started to smell rather pleasant, surprisingly enough. It doesn't smell anywhere near as bad. Yeah, it smells pretty good. So all we're going to do, and we're not going to feed it at the moment because it doesn't need it, we'll put the lid back on it, wrap it back up, and then I'll check it later on this evening to see if the hooch has developed. If it has, I'm going to drain the hooch off, half it, and feed it again with flour and water. So, day 6, we're at the penultimate day of this sourdough starter, and to be honest, this stuff is almost ready to make a loaf. So what we're going to do today, as we've done every other day, is we're going to feed it and let it to rest, and we'll have a little look at it later. Hopefully it'll be at the top of the jar. And there we are. We're going to get that all mixed in and leave it for about 12 to 24 hours. Let it ferment. Hopefully it'll go up to the top of the jar and it'll be ready to use tomorrow. So, the last day that we're going to be doing this starter, okay, because it's pretty much ready. As you can see from the consistency, it's nice and gloopy, very, very thick. So what we're going to be doing, we're going to be doing a few things today. I'm going to be naming it, because we've got a great name. I am going to be condensing it into a fresh jar, which is going to be its home for the foreseeable future. And then we're probably going to feed it again just to make it active in its new jar while we store it away. Okay, so the first thing we're going to be doing is we're going to condense half of this into a fresh jar. Here goes. See what a mess I can make. And there we go, surprisingly little mess. So we have got our sourdough starter now condensed into our new jar, and this is its new home. So what's its new name? Well, come up with lots of different names for this, and I've settled on one that takes me back a little bit to my childhood, I must confess. So for those of you old enough to remember, I have called my sourdough starter Joey. Perfect name, Joey. If you can remember back to the 80s, there was an 80s sitcom called Bread, and there was a character in there called Joey, and that's where I got the name from. So this is Joey, and I'm going to leave him now at room temperature to ferment a little bit further. Hopefully he will form a new hooch. This will ferment in the jar. We'll be able to feed him and then put him in the fridge. So we'll run through a few pointers again with this sourdough starter. It's taken us obviously 7 days to produce. We've had to name it and we've had to feed it. Okay, and the reason we fed it every 12 really to 24 hours was because we kept it at room temperature, and this was just to get the culture active and alive. And now it is, we can leave it there, and once we fed it again, we'll pop it in the fridge. And if you keep it in the fridge, you'll be able to only feed it, or you only need to feed it, for that matter, once a week, once the hooch forms. And that's it really. All you want to do then before you use it is feed it about 4 hours before you want to make your bread. And then once it's started to become active, you can use it as part of the ingredients to make a beautiful artisan sourdough loaf. Enjoy, Joey.